Hello, everyone. And before we begin, I want to put this message out there. This episode contains discussion of child sexual abuse, grooming, and institutional cover ups, particularly within religious institutions. Some content may be disturbing or emotionally triggering, especially for survivors of abuse. Listener discretion is strongly advised. If you or someone you know is struggling or has experienced abuse, please seek help. Resources are listed in the show notes. We're talking about this because the silence has gone on long enough, and the lies have cost too much. And welcome back to The Problem With. We are on the Lies We Tell episode. As you probably have heard, there's a trigger warning, but I'm going to reiterate on this episode. We're going to deal with a very heavy subject that it needs to be addressed. And it's because we see it every day, and we see it in every race, every political race we see. So, again, here's a trigger warning for, not a trigger warning, but like it's a warning for you guys who, if you're someone who you know, or you're someone who survives sexual abuse or anything like that, and this episode's going to deal with about that. So if this is something you don't want to listen to, I understand. It's just something that I think needs to be addressed. So with that, today we're going to talk about the grooming scare that came out of nowhere, especially from the Republican Party. But before we start with that, I'm going to get real here in a second. So if you have listened to the show, you understand I grew up religious. I went to church every Sunday, I listened, I prayed. I believe it when the Catholic Church said it was built on love, compassion, and truth. I believed them when they told me that we were supposed to love thy neighbor, that God didn't make any mistakes, that faith meant service. But you know what I also remember? I remember the whispers. I remember the hush-hush tone anytime someone questioned authority. I remember when someone will mysteriously disappear from the parish and no one talked about it. And I remember how everyone looked the other way. And the older I got, the more I realized the church I loved didn't always practice what it preached. So let's talk about that phrase, love thy neighbor. It's the central theme for so much of Christianity. But somewhere along the line, that love came with a fine print. Love thy neighbor, unless they're gay, unless they're trans, unless they don't believe what you believe, unless they speak up, unless they're a different race, a different religion, or they look different. And what do they do instead? The people who scream that love thy neighbor, they scream groomer at a drag performer reading books to kids. But they stay silent about the priests or the pastors who's been reassigned 3 times because of credible allegations. They pass laws to ban rainbow flags in schools, but protect churches from legal accountability when a youth pastor molests a child. So, and let's be clear, there's no bigger projection in America American life right now than the conservative Christian panic about grooming. They say it's about protecting the children. But where were they when over 300 Southern Baptist pastors were exposed for abuse? Where were they when the Catholic Church paid out billions in settlements over decades? Where are they now that we know some churches knew about it and cover it up? You know where they were? Voting for the same people who helped hide it, sitting in pews pretending it never happened, and calling queer people the threat. So when I left the church, it wasn't because I hated faith. It was because I couldn't ignore the hypocrisy anymore. I watched it as the same pulpit that told me Jesus loved the poor, the marginalized, the sick, the sinner, turn around and demonize people who were different. I watched a plays that claimed to represent moral clarity defend men who preyed on children, as long as they wore a collar or quoted scripture or donated big. And then they have the nerve to say teachers are the problem? or drag performers, or librarians, or the LGBTQ plus kids? And let me ask you something. Who's more likely to harm a child? A drag queen reading green eggs and ham in a public library, or a church leader with unchecked power behind closed doors? Because here's the truth. Most abuse doesn't come from strangers. It comes from people you trust, people who have access, people you protect without even realizing it. So when I see politicians waving Bibles while attacking LGBTQ plus kids, when I see churches calling other people predators while refusing to clean up their own pews, I don't see faith. I see a weapon and I see projection. I see the damn lie. And that's what this episode is about. The lie that the biggest threat to children comes from outsiders, from the woke teachers, from the groomer activists, from people just trying to live. When the truth is, the numbers don't lie. The biggest cover-ups, the deepest betrayals, the most protected abusers have always been in places like churches. And the people who scream the loudest about grooming are very often the ones trying hardest to distract you from what's happening in their own backyard. So let's talk about that lie. Let's talk about the numbers. Let's talk about the survivors. Let's talk about the lawsuits, the cover-ups, the settlements, the silencing. Let's talk about the real threat to children and why no one wants to admit it. Because once you see the hypocrisy clearly, it'll never look the same again.
Anita Bryant, once a celebrated singer and Miss Oklahoma, passed away December 16, 2024. Bryant rose to fame in the 1960s with hits like Till There Was You and became the face of Florida orange juice, coining the famous slogan, "Breakfast without orange juice is like a day without sunshine." But in the 1970s, her career took a dramatic turn when she launched the Save Our Children campaign, an anti-LGBTQ+ movement aimed at repealing anti-discrimination laws in Florida. And the backlash was swift. LGBTQ+ activists boycotted Florida orange juice, and Bryant claimed she lost over $500,000 in concert bookings. Her campaign left a legacy of division, one that still resonates today. Some remember her for her music and charm, others for a movement that changed the course of LGBTQ+ rights forever.
1977, when Anita Bryant came out in Dade County, that put a spark. That really did it. I actually went to some demonstrations, but I remembered my neighbor told me on Gay Pride 1977, he said it seemed like everybody came from all directions and converged on Sheridan Square, and it was huge. Everybody came up Fifth Avenue, and you could see from sidewalk to sidewalk an unbroken mass that stretched for 40 blocks. And I was at 34th Street, or about that, and I skated into the crowd, and that entire crowd, thousands, tens of thousands, opened up like the Red Sea, and everybody was cheering. It was just beautiful.
So this is not just a political episode, because this is more like a personal for me as well. Because before we even get started, I need to say this. It's because a lot of people need to understand, I didn't grow up questioning the church. And again, I grew up in Colombia, very heavily Catholic. Everything we did had some form of Catholic view. Every Christmas, everybody did their. Actually, leading up to Christmas, we did las velitas, if you know what I mean. And you have to sing in front of the nativity scene and all that. So anyways, I knew what Catholic Church was. I grew up inside of it, and I sang in the pews. I bowed my head. I believed them when they said love thy neighbor. I was baptized. I had communion. I did all that stuff. But at some point, I had to confront the fact that not everyone was considered a neighbor, according to the church. That some people, for example, queer people, trans people, anyone who didn't fit in the mold, were seen as a threat, not as children of God, not as humans, but as threats. And then when I saw that, and I heard that, when I really saw it, I couldn't unsee it. Because it wasn't just judgment, it was straight up hate. And the hate was being sold in the language of protection. And that's what this episode really is also about. I mean, I already mentioned that, but let's start with our first part, where it started, and where this started. So let's go back all the way back in Florida, 1977. I know, Florida, of course. The year a woman named Anita Bryant launched a campaign called the Save Our Children. And I want you to really hear the name of that campaign, because that's the exact same language being used today. And what was Bryant's goal? To overturn a local ordinance that protected gay people from discrimination in housing and employment. Her reasoning? Gay people are recruiting kids. Gay teachers are indoctrinating students. Queer people are dangerous, especially around children. Does that sound familiar? And she went on TV. She got pastors behind her, and her campaign worked. The ordinance was repealed. She became a hero to the religious right. And she said she laid the foundation for the idea that queerness equals danger. And this was never about proven harm. It was about a moral panic. It was about making people afraid of the other and using children as the shield. So then in the 1980s came, and with it, the AIDS crisis. Oh my gosh, it gets good. It gets bad, guys. Tens of thousands of people were dying. And instead of compassion, we got silence and condemnation. President Reagan, of course, didn't even say the word AIDS publicly until 1985, years into the epidemic. Churches call it the gay plague. Sorry, I can't. Disgusting what these people are saying. And pastors went on air and said AIDS was God's punishment for sin. They say this every time something happens. COVID was the same thing. And here's the kicker. They weren't just blaming people for being sick. They were reinforcing the idea that LGBTQ plus folks were inherently dangerous. And suddenly gay people weren't just immoral. They were diseased, contagious, filthy. They were demonized in the media, mocked in late night TV, and completely abandoned by the same institution that preached love and grace, or love thy neighbor. And this is where the idea that queer people were a public health threat took root. And I want you to remember this. When people want to erase a group, they start by convincing others that the group is a danger. A danger to your values, a danger to your children, a danger to your safety. And the 1980s was the decade of fear, and it was weaponized. I mean, a war on gay people, war on drugs, war on crime. I mean, my goodness. So, and then we move into the 90s. The church didn't back off. It doubled down. The family values movement exploded. Pat Robertson, Jerry Falwell, the rise of the evangelical media. And with it, the new villain became gay rights movement itself. Every push for equality was framed as a threat to this traditional family, and children were always the excuse. You probably heard this one. This is what they said. If we let gay people adopt, what kind of example would they set? Or what if they're just doing it to get access to kids? The same old lie, rebranded for a new era. And then came California's Prop A in 2008. It banned same-sex marriage after it had already been legalized. How did they get voters to support it? By running ads showing kids coming home from school saying, "My teacher said 2 men can get married." That was the whole play. Scare parents, push the panic button. They're coming for your kids. And now let's fast forward to the 2010s and 2020s. Once gay marriage was legalized nationally in 2015, they needed a new target. So they pivoted to trans people especially trans youth. And suddenly it was all about bathrooms. We can't let trans women into women's restrooms. We have to protect our daughters. It was never about bathrooms. It was about visibility. It was about fear. The moment trans folks started existing publicly in media, in schools, and conversations, the right flipped the switch. And just like before, they used children as the excuse all the time. Trans people are confused. They're mentally ill. They're being manipulated, is what they will yell. Or they're gonna rape your kids, is what they said all the time. And it was that, if that wasn't enough, they brought back the word groomer. God, every time. Now anyone who supported trans kids or affirmed their identity or dared say the word non-binary in a classroom was labeled a groomer. Teachers, parents, doctors, all under attack. It wasn't just hate, it was targeted erasure. And let's get current. Let's talk about the last few years. The Florida's Don't Say Gay law passed in 2022 by the awesome Governor DeSantis, who's the biggest piece of shit you ever seen. If you believe in heaven and hell, he has a special place in hell. Suddenly, you couldn't even acknowledge that gay people exist in the classroom without the risk of being reported. Books got banned again. Teachers got fired, of course. Counselors couldn't talk about gender identity because why not? And it didn't stop in Florida. Dozens of states jumped on board. Over 500 anti-LGBTQ plus bills introduced in 2023 alone, and is the most in U.S. history. Why? Because once they labeled queer people as groomers, they could do anything. Ban their books, erase them from schools, demonize them in church, and call it protection. This wasn't about safety. It was a moral purge, hiding behind children of every time. They used children as shields. And here's what really pisses me off. While all of this is happening, while drag performers are being called predators for reading green eggs and ham, and while teachers are being harassed for having a rainbow sticker or everybody's welcome sign in their schools, you know who the real predator is? They're still protected, still employed, still preaching. Let's start with one. The Catholic Church has paid over $3 billion in sexual abuse settlements. That's billion with the capital B. Then we go with the next one. Then with the other capital B. The Southern Baptist Convention had over 700 ministers and volunteers accused of abuse between 1998 and 2018, and many were kept in place or quietly moved to other churches. Jehovah's Witness? Same story. Massive cover-ups, documented cases, lawsuits, silence. But where's the outrage? Where's the governors holding a press conference about that? Where's the law banning clergy for working with kids until they pass background checks? Because there isn't one. Because that would mean holding power accountable. And let's be real, they don't want that. They want control. They want obedience. And they want to be the only ones allowed to speak. And they want everyone else silenced. So yeah, the word groomer has meaning. It means abuse, it means manipulation, and it means trauma. But it also means turn into a political slur. And a deadly one. Because when you label someone a danger to children, you're not just canceling them. You're putting a target on their back. This lie has cost people their jobs, it's driven kids to suicide, it's fueled harassment, violence, censorship, and fear. All while the real predators keep getting away with it. One is president, so go figure. So if you're one of the folks who claims to care about protecting children, start with the churches. Start with the institutions that actually cover up abuse for decades. And maybe, just maybe, stop using kids as human shields for your political fear-mongering. You fucking cowards. Because in the next segment, we're going there. We're pulling back this curtain on the actual stats. The documented abuse, the cover-ups, the lawsuits, the systemic silence in religious institutions. Because it's time to stop pretending that the danger is in the library. It's not. It's in the churches.
searing, damning language, the grand jury report revealed the dark secrets of the Catholic Church in Pennsylvania. Priests were raping little boys and girls, and the men of God who were responsible for them did nothing. They hid it all.
It was child sexual abuse, including rape, committed by grown men, priests, against children.
The report found over 1,000 child victims identified in the church's own records. The alleged crimes often described as inappropriate contact or boundary issues.
I am so angry.
Julianne Bort says she was molested as a teen. When she came forward in 2002, she says the church said it was hiring a private investigator.
I found out today that it wasn't him that they were looking at. They were looking at me.
The report finding a pattern among the bishops and church leaders. The main thing was not to help children, but to avoid scandal. It names more than 300 predator priests in 6 dioceses, from one end of the state to the other, home to more than 1.7 million Catholics. Almost every instance of abuse too old to be prosecuted. But the investigation did result in 2 priests being criminally charged with sexually assaulting children during the past decade. From the diocese today, apologies.
I ask you, the church asks you for forgiveness.
But for some, words are not enough.
People want total transparency. They want the bishops to report what happened, why it happened, and how they're going to make sure that it never happens again.
Many of those same bishops and their past handling of abuse cases are implicated in this investigation, including Cardinal Donald Wuerl, the former Bishop of Pittsburgh. Wuerl, now in Washington, says he acted with diligence, concern for victims, and to prevent future abuse.
So, Ann, you say some of these cases are too old for court. So what can be done?
Well, the grand jury wants to change that, Lester. The grand jury, among its 4 recommendations, includes eliminating the statute of limitations that ends up protecting predators instead of victims. And it also recommends barring those non-disclosure agreements in criminal cases.
So let's get uncomfortable, because this is where the silence starts to crack. So the last segment, we talked about how the word groomer has been twisted into a political weapon. But now we're going to talk about who's actually doing the grooming. We're talking facts, not fear, or if we're talking receipts, not rhetoric, because the truth matters more than their talking points. And if you're one of the people out there screaming about protecting children, then this is the part where you need to listen the hardest, because the actual danger, it doesn't look like drag queens. It does sound like queer teachers, or it doesn't sound like drag queens. I'm trying to get my words together today. And it's not the teachers reading a book that makes you uncomfortable. It looks like people kids trust. People who wear collars. They carry Bibles, lead prayers, people who have access, authority, and institutional protection. So let's start with something that should be required reading in every school, church, courtroom, and legislature in the country. According to the United States Department of Justice and the CDC, 93% of child sexual abuse victims know their abuser. That's not some shadowy stranger in a van. That's a coach. That's a babysitter, a family member, a pastor. And around 60% of abuse is committed by someone in the child's family or extended circle. Less than 10% of cases involve strangers. And get this, statistically, there's no link between LGBTQ+ identity and child abuse. None. Oh, but there is a link between unchecked authority and abuse. Let me repeat that. Because sometimes people are deaf or they choose to ignore this. There's no correlation between being gay or trans and being a predator. But there's a clear pattern of predators operating in trusted spaces with zero oversight. And what's more protected in this country than the church? Let's talk about the big one. The big one, the Catholic Church, everybody knows about this. This isn't just a scandal, it's a damn system. We now know that since the 1950s, over 300,000 children worldwide have been sexually abused by clergy. In the United States alone, more than 19,000 victims have come forward, and that's just the ones who know about it. Now, if you want to know 19,000 victims, that's filling up in a basketball arena. That's how many kids have been abused. Some dioceses like Boston, Chicago, Los Angeles, Philadelphia have had hundreds of accused priests. And the church's response? Shuffle them between parishes, silence the victims, fight legislation that will open up all cases, use non-disclosure agreement to bury the truth. And here's the bottom line. The Catholic Church has paid out over $3 billion in settlements, and they still fought to keep names redacted in reports. Let that sink in. This institution, which calls itself the moral backbone of civilization, actively protected known abusers and spent more on lawyers than on healing the survivors. And yet, where's the Groomer headline for them? Now let's shift to the largest Protestant denomination in the United States, the Southern Baptist Convention. In 2022, the SBC released a long-awaited internal report. It confirmed what survivors had been screaming for years. For 2 decades, the Baptist Church leaders cover up hundreds of abuse cases. They kept a secret database of abusers. They ignore or intimidated the victims. Oh God, today's just not a day. And they kept abusers in positions of power in churches with children. Over 700 ministers and volunteers were named. And still, the Southern Baptist Church leadership tried to claim this was an isolated issue. Yeah, because 700 ministers abusing is isolated. Not a pattern, not systemic, nothing. Just an isolated. But here's what the report proved. They didn't just fail to protect the children. They made a choice to protect their image instead. And if you're still screaming about a rainbow sticker in a classroom, but you say nothing about this and you still supported the SBC, you're not worried about kids, you're worried about the control. And let's not pretend this ends with Baptists and Catholics or evangelicals. Jehovah's Witnesses, they've been exposed in dozens of countries for shielding abusers. In 2018, an Australian commission found they had 1,006 alleged abusers on file and reported 0 to police. What about the Mormon Church? Thousands of allegations. Recent investigations in Arizona and Utah found that Mormon bishops were instructed to call a church hotline, not law enforcement, when abuse was reported. And what do all these stories have in common? Well, let me tell you. 1. A refusal to report crimes to police. 2. A fear of hurting the church's reputation. 3. A system that prioritizes loyalty over safety. You don't need a conspiracy theory when the documents are this public. This is an epidemic, not of queer identity, but of protected power in the church. And I want to step back for a second and remind you. These aren't just headlines, guys. These are real people, real kids who trusted adults to guide them, who were told this is a man of God, and who these kids were violated and then silenced, even told that this was their fault. Some of them tried to come forward and they were told to pray on it. Some were gaslit into believing they caused it. See what I just said? Some took their own lives. And meanwhile, the church kept building new campuses, kept collecting donations, and they kept preaching purity while hiding predators in their ranks. Let me say this clearly. There's nothing more demonic than using God's name to protect evil. So here's the question. Why do people still stay quiet about this? Why is it easier to scream at a drag queen reading a storybook than to question a youth pastor? Because these churches have power, sadly. Not just spiritual, but political, economic, and cultural. Many Americans still believe that churches are untouchable, that questioning them is an attack on faith. But let me ask you this. Is faith the same thing as silence? Is religion the same thing as loyalty to corruption? Is love thy neighbor only for the unbroken? Because if your church teaches that real threat is a gay teacher who just wants to exist, but says nothing about pastors who prey on children, then that's not faith. That's indoctrination. Oh, look at that. And so who's really doing the grooming? Not queer people, not trans youth, not the drag queen reading. And it's pastors, priests, bishops, church elders. It's the people who were trusted and protected and enabled. And the same people who yell groomer the loudest, they vote for the cover-up. They tie to the institution. They write laws that protect the predator and punish the survivor. Let's not pretend we don't see what this is really about. Because this is projection. This is political power. This is spiritual rod wrapped in righteousness. So we're going to talk about how the church keeps getting away with it. Because hiding abuse isn't just a sin. It's a system. And that system is still very much in power.
Only on CBS News Texas, we are learning new allegations now of disturbing behavior towards young female members of a church congregation. That congregation from former Gateway Church founding pastor Robert Morris. This comes as the South Lake megachurch released new details of an internal investigation that Morris allegedly sexually abused a 12-year-old girl when he was in his 20s. The church also acknowledges there is now a criminal investigation, but said it does not involve current leadership. Our Don White tonight speaking exclusively with a woman who says she flagged concerns about Morris almost 4 decades ago.
What happened to Cindy Clemenshire was heartbreaking and vile.
That's how Gateway Church elder Trey Wilbanks started Sunday service.
We denounce sexual abuse in all of its forms, and we feel deep sorrow for those who have been victimized by such despicable actions.
Wilbanks told members about findings of the independent investigation done by law firm Haynes & Boone. It was launched after Cindy Clemenshire came forward with allegations as a then 12-year-old against Robert Morris when he was in his 20s. Wilbanks admitted some church leaders knew about the allegations and did nothing about it.
Met Robert Morris as a member of Shady Grove Church back in the 1980s.
Michelle Seidler says that's where she first had concerns about Morris. She says she brought to church leaders at Shady Grove before he founded Gateway.
They just were like, okay, Michelle, you just need to calm down. You need to, there's no proof of this or that.
Michelle says her decision to finally speak out isn't to destroy Gateway Church, but to bring about accountability and healing for what Robert Morris is accused of.
What matters is the truth, and that people are held accountable.
Gateway took over the Shady Grove Church in 2013. Seidler decided to finally speak up after the release of the internal investigation.
We're not going to let this rest until there's justice.
This comes as some members are suing Gateway Church over claims of financial misconduct. In South Lake, Don White, CBS News, Texas.
That investigation continues. Good rain for a lot of us today, but threats about severe weather, those concerns still rising as well. Colin helping us plan ahead. And when we come back, Jason Allen as well, continuing to track the Texas state of mind.
You work 2 jobs.
Yep. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
There's 3 of us to afford rent, and we're in a small town.
We head to East Texas, communities nestled between 3 national forests. Voters say they're worried about green and not trees. That other green. We'll be back.
All right, we've talked about the lie. We talked about the truth, and now we talk about the cover-up. Because let me tell you something. Abuse doesn't just happen. It gets protected. It gets moved around. It gets papered over. It survives because the people in power decide it's easier to bury it than to confront it. And when it comes to churches, especially the biggest, most powerful ones in this country, they built entire systems to do exactly that. So this segment, this one's about the silence, the sanctified silence, the way abuse was allowed to thrive, not in the shadows, but right out in the open, hidden behind pulpits, prayers, and paperwork. So let's talk about the steps churches. especially institutions like the Catholic Church and the SBC take when abuse allegations come up, because there's a formula. And once you see the pattern, you can't unsee it. Step 1, deny. The first move is always denial. He's a respected member of the clergy. There's no evidence. This is just a misunderstanding. Sometimes they even gaslight the victim into thinking they're the sinner. Or maybe if this person stopped wearing that, they approached the pastor. Step 2, delay. If that doesn't work, stall. Internal investigations. We're praying about it, dragging it out until the statute of limitations runs out. They hope people lose interest. They hope victims give up. And they usually succeed because the trauma reporting is often worse than the abuse itself. Step 3, discredit. If survivors don't go away, time to attack their character. They're mentally unstable. They're just after the money. They are anti-Christian. You know what that is, guys? It's a character assassination disguised as damage control. It's what institutions do when they are protecting the abusers, not the people. And now let's talk about the legal system, because here's the ugly truth. Churches don't just escape justice. They have help. The statute of limitations. In many states, victims of child sex abuse only have a few years to come forward. Think about that. You're traumatized as a child. You know what? Actually, I don't want you to think about that. That's terrible. But let's step through the process. Like, imagine that it's like you're traumatized as a child. It takes you decades to fully process what happened, and by the time you're ready to speak, too late. The clock ran out. Some states have extended these limits, but you know who fought hard against that? Here we go. You all favorites, the Catholic Church, the Mormon Church, and the Southern Baptist Convention, and the Evangelical Church. They literally lobbied legislatures to keep the statute short, not to protect children, but to protect themselves from lawsuits. That's not spiritual leadership, guys. That's a cover-up. Then we go to the religious exemptions. Churches are also shielded by something called the First Amendment protection for religious freedom. And now, don't get it twisted. I believe in religious freedom. It's like religious freedom. But when that freedom is used as a weapon to protect abusers, that's not freedom. That is fraud. Churches have argued in court that internal investigations and spiritual counseling should not be subject to outside legal scrutiny. In some states, clergy are not required to report abuse if it's disclosed during confession. And they say this all the time, guys. Is this a thing I heard also from Catholic Church when if you go to a priest and you tell them that you killed someone, as long as you told them, they cannot tell the police. That's the crazy part, isn't it? Because that's part of their oath of priesthood, and I think there's so much slippery slope going about that. So let me say that again. If a child tells a priest they were abused and it's part of a confession, that priest might not be required to do anything. They actually are not required to do anything. That's not justice. That's a sanctioned silence. Now, if what happens to a Catholic priest that decides to break that vow, they take their priesthood away. They get, I forgot the word for it. They're no longer Catholic priest for doing the right thing. And you want to know how churches stay rich even after the massive settlements? Well, the shell corporations, churches, especially large dioceses, restructure themselves into dozens of LLCs and trust accounts. That way, if one gets sued, they claim they have no money. Oh, the parish owns the land, not the diocese. The trust holds the funds, not the church. It's a corporate shield for spiritual rot. And you better believe they are insured to the teeth. I mean, the amount of insurance they go through is amazing. There are whole companies like the Catholic Mutual Group that exist solely to protect the church's finances during the abuse lawsuits. They don't just cover legal fees, they help manage the messaging. They coach leaders on how to respond without admitting guilt. And you thought drag queens were the organized threat? Jesus, guys. Sorry if I say the name. And let's be clear, the church doesn't just hide behind the law. They help write it. Over the last 30 years, the Catholic Church has spent hundreds of millions of dollars lobbying to block reforms that would expand the rights of abuse survivors. The Southern Baptist Church and other evangelical groups have pressured lawmakers to avoid creating registries of clergy abuse. Church lobbying groups have opposed background checks, mandatory reporting laws, and civil liability windows for victims. So the next time someone says, "Why didn't those kids come forward sooner?" maybe ask, why did the church spend millions to make sure they couldn't? And here's the part that hurts the most. The silence from inside the congregation. We're talking about communities that tell survivors not to hurt the body of Christ. Ain't that some shit? Shame people for going public. Ain't that some shit there too? Celebrate pastors who overcame false accusations. I've seen that too. God, it's ridiculous. Pray for the abuser's redemption while shunning the victims. That one's common, guys. We see it not just in churches, but like a woman who survives a rape allegation or survives rape, but they don't disclose it like 10 years later. Then the people will say, "Oh, they're just there for the money." It's like, it's not just the churches, but it's ridiculous, man. Let me go back. It's spiritual manipulation. It's guilt, shame, gaslighting, and it works, sadly. Survivors end up carrying not just trauma, but the weight of being blamed for what happened to them, and for daring to speak out. And this silence isn't passive. It's lethal, guys. So let's end with the big question. Why is this still happening? Why are churches with decades of documented abuse still tax exempt, still worship, still trusted with children? Because the system wasn't designed to protect kids. It was designed to protect the church. Duh. To protect reputation, revenue, and ritual. That's what they care about. They don't care about the children. They just care about their reputation. Of course. And this is not a few bad apples. This is a barrel. The institution, the playbook, the legal protection, all are working together. And the louder these folks scream groomer at LGBTQ plus people, the more they hope you don't look in their direction. So here's what we learn. 1, abuse doesn't just happen. It gets covered up. 2, churches don't just fail to act. They build systems to stay silent. And 3, while queer folks are getting harassed in public, the people who've actually hurt kids are walking free, preaching sermons and shaking hands with politicians. So if your faith requires silence in the face of abuse, if your religion teaches you to distrust survivors, if your church spends more money on lawyers than on justice, then maybe the devil isn't outside the walls. Maybe he's wearing robes and call it a ministry.
Story at 6, thousands of pages describing sexual abuse by members of the clergy released today by the Milwaukee Archdiocese. The reports contain graphic descriptions of decades of abuse and also bring to light how the church handled the situation. NBC 26's Jonathan Gregg has the details live from the newsroom tonight.
In fact, there are hundreds of pages dedicated to individual priests who were repeatedly accused of abusing children. Not only that, for the first time, people can read details on how the church moved priests from parish to parish without punishment. The names and summaries of the offending priests are listed on the diocese website. One priest in particular, Father Lawrence Murphy, molested as many as 200 deaf boys while he was in charge of the St. John's School for the Deaf in St. Francis. Of the 45 named, at least 15 spent time in either Fond du Lac, Sheboygan, or had stints in both cities. A statement released by Archbishop Jerome Listecki says, "My hope in voluntarily making these documents public is that they will aid abuse survivors, families, and others in understanding the past, reviewing the present, and allowing the church in southeastern Wisconsin to continue moving forward." The victim advocate group SNAP calling for a federal investigation.
And while today is a historic victory for victim survivors and a validation of what we've been saying for years, that there has been a widespread cover-up in this archdiocese, we still have to uncover the rest of that cover-up.
Many of the priests named are now dead. The archdiocese claims church leaders tried to deal with the issues with the information they had at the time. Reporting live in the Green Bay newsroom, Jonathan Gregg, NBC 26.
So let's talk about what happens when people stop being silent. We talked through the lie. We walked through the damage. But this time, this segment right here of this episode, this is about the fight back, the pushback, the resistance, the survivors, and the journalists, the whistleblowers, the people who didn't care about how powerful the institution was. They told the truth anyway. Because if you want to see what real accountability can look like, what it takes to force institutions like the Catholic Church to even pretend to clean house, you gotta go to Boston. You gotta go to 2002. You know where I'm going with this. And we gotta talk about Spotlight, not just a movie, guys. This was tremendous when this happened. So let me paint you the picture for you. In early 2002, a small investigative team of the Boston Globe called the Spotlight team started digging into some local reports about priests being quietly reassigned after abuse allegations. Nothing flashy, no headlines, just rumors and sealed court records. But what they found was a damn bomb under the altar. The Boston Archdiocese, one of the most powerful Catholic institutions in the country, had been systematically covering up child sexual abuse by priests for decades. They uncovered internal documents, letters, settlements, agreements, and church memos that showed the Archdiocese knew about the abuse, and not only did they do nothing, they moved the priests to new parishes over and over again. The truth was, they weren't protecting children, they were protecting themselves. And the man on top of it all, Cardinal Bernard Law. How convenient that his last name is Law. He had the power to remove priests. He had the knowledge of what they did, and he chose to shuffle them around like chess pieces. By the time Spotlight published their first big report in January 2002, they had already uncovered evidence that over 90 priests in the Boston area had been accused of sexually abusing children. The number eventually grew to more than 250 priests in Boston. That was just Boston. Like, it's just so crazy to me how people don't. Never mind. And so the paper also uncovers secret settlements. The Archdiocese paid families hush money, sealed court records, and told victims to forgive while letting abusers keep their collars, because they always do this. They said they make a mistake, Jesus would have forgiven them. That's what they were saying to these families. Oh God, man, these people are sick. And listen to this. A 2003 poll found that 60% of the Catholics believed their own church had covered up the abuse. Not suspected, not wonder, they believed it. That's how big this was. Then what happened next? Well, it was the domino effect. Other papers and victims started coming forward across the United States. In Philadelphia, Chicago, Los Angeles, Phoenix, Milwaukee, you name it. Then it spread globally. Ireland launched a massive inquiry. Germany investigated Catholic boarding schools. Australia created a national commission. Chile, Poland, Canada all found patterns of abuse and cover-up stretching back decades. And the Vatican tried to play defense. Pope John Paul II called the allegations sensationalized. It wasn't until the evidence became undeniable that church officials started offering weak apologies, always carefully worded to avoid admitting full responsibility. And what happened to Cardinal Bernard Law, by the way? Did he go to jail? You know this. Come on, guys. No, of course the fuck he didn't. He resigned the Archbishop of Boston, and he was rewarded with a cushy ceremonial position in Rome, appointed by the Pope himself. You want to talk about accountability? It's like, that's the system. Protect your image, relocate the guilty, and punish the brave. The brave are the people coming forward. It's just like, the more when I researched this thing, guys, it was so. I am rereading my script and my talking points about this, and it's just so. It makes me so angry. Anyways, let's move on. Let's keep going. And I want to take a minute here. and shift to the focus to the people who matter most in this story, the survivors, because none of it would have come to light without them. They were the ones who kept speaking up when no one listened, who walked into police stations and church offices and courtrooms and said, "This happened to me. This man did this. I was a child and no one protected me." And what did they get? Shunned by their own congregation, branded as liars, gaslit into silence, paid off and told to disappear. Go fuck themselves is what they're saying. Some of them suffer in silence for 30, 40, 50 years. Some of them didn't live long enough to see the church admit what it did. So if you want to talk about faith, start there. The faith it takes to speak out when no one believes you. Now, in fairness, there were churches that tried to change. After the scandal exploded, some dioceses implemented mandatory reporting policies, zero tolerance rules for clergy, background checks, independent review boards. Good for them. That was the bare minimum. I mean, you read that and it's like, teachers have to do so much more to be able to teach. And this is so annoying to see this. Like, I get it. I know we have to do this because our job is, we're surrounded by students. And I get it. I know why we're doing this. But man, these people are so, oh God. All right, anyways, it's just so annoying, like, to see the obvious fact and people still say it's fake news. All right, but so anyways, so let's be real. Most of that came after public exposure, not during, but they made these changes after the public exposure, not before, not out of conscience, but it was out of crisis management, and some churches use it as PR more than reform. Here comes the favorite one. The Southern Baptist Conventions, for example, promised reform after the abuse report in 2022. But just a year later in 2023, survivors were already calling them out for not releasing names, not enforcing background checks, not removing abusive pastors. Oh, shocking. So yeah, some churches change policy, but very few change culture. Because real accountability, that costs power, and they're not willing to give that up. And let's talk about what will real accountability look like. Because we've been lied to for so long, people forget what justice even means in these cases. It would mean, here's what justice will mean: fully eliminated statutes of limitations for child sexual abuse, mandating reporting laws with no religious exemptions. If a clergy member hears about abuse, they report it. Creating a federal database of clergy abuse with public access. Listen, if there's a child predator, they have to go around and tell it. If they move to a neighborhood, they have to tell everybody they're a sexual predator, or whatever that is. Why are these predators in churches are the exception? Why? Anyways, then requiring every church that receives tax exemption to implement external audits and child safety reviews. Opening a RICO investigation, RICO, into the institution which with patterns of cover-up, because this isn't just sin, it's organized crime. And above all, listening to the survivors, compensating them, and believe in them. Okay? Don't give me this shit that's like, well, why did it take so long? If this would have happened to me, I would have said something. No, you wouldn't. And I hope that never happens to you or to any of your children. That you trust them with someone in the church and they get abused. I hope that never happens. Stop gaslighting these people. Stop believing these churches' lies. And so here's what I'm going to leave you with, because I've gone off the rails here. There are two kinds of faith. There's the faith that demands silence, the kind that tells you to sit down and pray it away, that says speaking out is betrayal, that pretends tradition is more sacred than truth. And then there's the faith that burns, the kind that says, this was wrong and I'm not afraid to say it, the kind that stands in front of the pulpit and says, no more. The kind that believes God isn't threatened by the truth, he demands truth. Faith doesn't mean ignoring abuse. Faith means fighting it, no matter who the abuser is. So if you're still part of the church that looks the other way, if your pastor tells you this is behind us, or that those people just want attention, maybe it's time to ask yourself who really needs forgiveness. because the people who screamed groomer the loudest, they built a house of worship with no windows and kept the doors locked tight. But the people who burned it down, those were the faithful ones. They walked through the fire and told the truth anyway.
Working for New Tribes Mission in Stanford is now behind bars, arrested for child porn. Warren Kennel was arrested as he returned from Brazil Friday after federal agents say they got a tip. West 2's Marina Morocco has the story.
And this local missionary from the New Tribes Mission in Stanford is accused of sexually abusing young girls as well as possession of child porn, all after federal agents were tipped off all the way from Brazil once those images surfaced on a website known for this type of content. A missionary abroad teaching lessons in Christianity, but investigators say Warren Kennel from the New Tribes Mission in Stanford was living in Brazil sexually abusing children. On Friday, he arrived on a flight into OIA, and federal agents were waiting for him at the airport. In his luggage, they found hard drives that contained 2 images of child porn, and one of them an adult abusing a girl. At first, he denied the pictures existed, but when confronted with the evidence, he said the man in the picture was him. He said both images dated from 2008 and 2009 and admitted to molesting a total of 4 children while abroad in Brazil, adding he'd photographed all of the minors. The New Tribes Mission issued this statement following his arrest. "We are heartsick that children have been victimized. While we are trying to confirm whether there is a connection between the accused's personal actions and our organization, we have put the accused on immediate leave." And Kennel was booked into the Seminole County Jail where he's being held without bond. Now, back in 2006, a part-time instructor here at the New Tribes Mission was also arrested for molesting 2 young boys. And in 2008, a youth pastor also faced charges for child pornography. For now, reporting in Stanford, Marina Morocco, West 2 News.
So here we are, after all the lies, all the evidence, all the receipts. You think this will be an open and shut, right? Like this story will be done, right? Oh no, it's not. Not even close. Because the groomer panic, the moral hysteria, the outright smearing of LGBTQ plus people as child predators, oh, that's still here, guys. Come on, louder, bolder, more dangerous than ever. So this is the final segment before my reflection. This is the moment they say the quiet part aloud. Not just what they're doing, but why they keep doing it, who benefits, and how we fight it. So let's start here. The groomer smear lives on because it works. It gets attention. It silences opposition. It justifies cruelty. And when you frame your opponents as literal predators, you don't have to debate them. You don't have to answer their questions. You don't even have to see them as human. That's why politicians, especially on the right, love it. Because calling a drag queen a groomer gets more airtime than talking about school funding. Of course it is. Because accusing teachers of indoctrinating kids gets more campaign donations than fixing healthcare. It's emotional, it's manipulative. It's being used by cowards who want power without accountability. And let's get this out in the open. While the GOP screams about protecting children, they've been writing and blocking laws that do the opposite. You don't believe me? Let me give you the example. 1. Blocking statute of limitations reform. In multiple states, GOP lawmakers had opposed extending or removing statutes of limitations for child sex abuse. You asking why? Because it would open thousands of lawsuits against churches and schools, many of them conservative institutions. Fucking shocking, right? 2. Defending clergy exemptions. GOP legislators have fought to maintain the clergy penitent privilege, meaning that if someone confesses abuse to a priest or pastor, it doesn't have to be reported to the police. That's not about God. That's about shielding predators from justice, because they know a lot of the politicians are a bunch of predators. We've seen it, guys. Come on. And then 3, punishing survivors and whistleblowers. This is the third example. There's many more. In states like Missouri, Florida, and Texas, Republicans have tried to criminalize the following: teachers who support trans students, doctors who provide gender-affirming care, or parents who affirm their LGBTQ+ child's identity. But you know what they haven't criminalized? Churches that knowingly moved abusers, missionary organizations that cover up overseas assaults, pastors who groom kids under the guise of discipleship. That tells you everything of what they believe in. Now, this part doesn't get talked about enough, because abuse isn't happening in just the United States churches. It's happening globally. And missionary organizations have become one of the most unregulated spaces for predators to operate. Why? Because missionaries operate in poor, isolated, vulnerable communities and are backed by donors, churches, and nonprofits that often have no accountability system. There are dozens of documented cases where American missionaries sexually abused children abroad. Churches found out and reassigned them to another country. No legal charges were ever filed because they were on foreign soil. That's some bullshit there, man. Let me say that again. Missionaries have assaulted children in Africa, Asia, Latin America, and the churches that sent them, they brought them home silently, with no consequences. Let me tell you one case out of Haiti. An American missionary named Daniel Pai was convicted for sexually abusing girls at an orphanage he ran. His supporters tried to paint it as a misunderstanding. See the pattern here? And guess what? Some United States churches still supported his work. You want to talk about evil hiding behind God's work? That's it. Let's bring it back to the survivors. Because in every single one of these stories, from Boston to Uganda, from Baptist churches to Mormon missions, there's someone who said, "No, I won't be quiet. Not this time." Some survivors have gone public. Some testified in court. They had to relive that pain in front of people that they don't know. Others just kept telling their stories until anyone believed them. Let's go, like Phil Saviano, the Boston survivor who helped the Spotlight team. He was abused by a priest in the 1960s. The church obviously ignored him, because why the fuck they would, and they always do the same shit every time. But he kept going, and he helped expose dozens of predators. Or here's another example, Jules Woodson, who spoke out in 2018 after being abused by her Southern Baptist youth pastor at the age of 17. He apologized publicly from the pulpit, and the church clapped. That's some crazy shit right there, man. It's like, come on. They clap for a predator. It's just so crazy. Hey, but Jules, she kept going. She helped launch a movement. Or Megan, who testified against her missionary abuser after being assaulted in Kenya. She went public despite her entire church turning on her. She was told she was damaging the kingdom, but she told the truth. These people are heroes, not the politicians. They're a bunch of fucking cowards. Not the pastors, they're predators. And not the press secretaries, neither. The survivors are the ones walking in the light, while everyone else hides in their pews. Let's go all the way back to the start. Because it becomes the groomer smear isn't offensive, it's deadly. And it creates a world where queer kids are afraid to come out. Trans youth are denied life-saving care. And teachers and allies are silenced. Real predators are walking free right now. It turns out or outrage in the wrong direction. And if we don't fight back, if we stay quiet because we're afraid of being labeled too political or too angry or too woke, we're just part of the problem. Because the GOP and their church allies are hoping we do that. They want to be the only voice in the room. They want to write the laws, own the morality, control the narrative. We can't let them, guys. Come on. So here's how we might end this segment. And I'm not gonna lie, this is emotional for me, because like I mentioned, I grew up believing the Catholic Church. I believe the words, I believe everything there. And now I watch people weaponize those same words to justify cruelty, silence victims, and protect predators. Guys, that's not love. That's not faith. That's fear. The real enemy isn't queerness. It's power without the accountability. It's silence when it matters most. It's institutions so obsessed with image that they rather protect a rapist than believe a child. We need to reclaim the truth, not just by calling out the lie, but by refusing to be silent about who's telling it. The church won't clean itself up. The politicians won't write justice on their own. It's on us. The survivors, the allies, the angry, the unafraid. Because once you see the lie, once you really see who's been lying and why, you never go back. And more importantly, you make damn sure no one else falls for this again.
In another major court case, we're hearing today from writer E. Jean Carroll following her civil trial victory against Donald Trump. The former president was found liable for sexual abuse and defamation in a first-of-its-kind judgment. CBS's Robert Costa tonight with Trump's response to the case.
Donald Trump faced voters for the first time tonight since a civil jury found him liable for sexual abuse and defamation of writer E. Jean Carroll.
This is a fake story, made up story. She's a whack job.
He also repeated false claims that the 2020 election was stolen.
That was a rigged election, and it's a shame that we had to go through it.
The political impact on Trump's campaign is still emerging, but several Republicans have said the verdict is further evidence he should not be the nominee.
He is not fit to become president of the United States.
I think the whole country is looking for a fresh start.
For now, Trump is the clear frontrunner in the race for the Republican nomination. New Hampshire voters have 9 months before the party's primary, and former state GOP legislator Kimberly Rice said the verdict should not be shrugged off.
Why does it matter to you?
It matters to me as a woman because, I've been in a position before where a boss has chased me around, and, women should be believed.
But at a local Manchester diner, June Dickerson said she stands with Trump.
Because he's a very honorable man who is always honest and forthright, and I don't believe lies.
One of Trump's rivals for the nomination, former Arkansas Governor Asa Hutchinson, who campaigned in New Hampshire today, said Republicans will suffer if they back Trump again.
If Trump becomes the nominee, do you believe Republicans would face political peril in a general election, especially with women voters?
Well, I don't believe Trump can be elected, and Trump is the candidate that the Democrats would prefer. And that is enhanced by the fact that you've got this jury verdict now that made this finding.
Former President Trump's focus tonight is on New Hampshire, but the campaign continues in other states in the coming days. Trump will be in Iowa this weekend, rallying conservative voters in the state where the caucuses will be held next year. He faces competition there as well, as rivals talk about matters of character on the campaign trail, as all of these controversies surround Trump. Nora.
Robert Costa, thank you very much.
All right, guys, let's look back. Let's breathe for a second. We've spent this episode walking through the horror, through the hypocrisy, through silence so loud it's so deafening. But here at the end of it all, this isn't just about the churches. This isn't about the predators in pulpits or missionaries on planes. It's about the pattern. A damn playbook that abusers and the people who protect them use over and over and over again. And right now, that same playbook is being used by the Republican Party. I know everybody here, when I post the segments, everybody's like, you're just a liberal, you don't understand. No. Again, I give a shit about the Democrats. Yes, I'm a liberal, but it doesn't mean that I support I don't agree with everything the Democrats do. Anyways, let me get that through. Anyways, so the Republican Party uses this, and especially about the religious right. And most of all, here's the important part. Trump uses this same playbook. Donald J. Trump. Let me get that name good. the dictator and president and dictator fascist orange man Donald Trump. And let's just call it what it is. The GOP has adopted the exact same tactics that the Catholic Church used for decades. Denied everything, attack the accuser, deflect them with moral panic, rebrand the abuser as the victim. You see that? Oh my God, guys, come on. Again, I know it's a cult. I know the MAGA movement is a cult and they don't believe anything. That's what they want. That's how churches work. Oh, but here we go. And Trump, he's the poster boy for this entire strategy. You ever notice how every time he's accused of something, sexual assault, fraud, conspiracy, his first move is always, I didn't do it. It's always, she's lying. They're out to get me. This is a witch hunt. Sounds familiar? Because it's the same thing Cardinal Law did. The same thing SBC leaders did. Southern Baptist Church, if you want a reminder. The same thing missionaries did when survivors spoke up in orphanages or mission camps overseas. They paint the victim as the threat and the abuser as the real victim. And the sad part, it works until it doesn't. So let's talk about, and I know this is not about really about the church, but it's very important. Sorry. Let's talk about Trump and Epstein. Oh, yes, we're going there again. Because the media dance around it, but we won't. Trump knew Jeffrey Epstein. That's the fucking fact. They partied together. They hosted girls together. There are photos, there are quotes, there are videos. I mean, there's even a birthday card Trump sent to Epstein handwritten that came out just this past week. Trump literally said, like, in 2002 in a quote, he's a lot of fun with. It is even said that he likes beautiful women as much as I do. And many of them are on the younger side. Like, that's not subtle, guys. Come on. That's not out of context. That's a man showing you who he is. A predator, a rapist. And when Epstein finally got arrested in 2019, like, or before that, what did Trump do? Oh my God, he said this. I don't know him well. We had a falling out. And then he wished Ghislaine Maxwell well. Yes, he really said that on national TV. Wish her well after she got arrested. He pulled the same bullshit move the church pulled. Distance, distract, deny. All while staying quiet about the victims. And the abuse we're talking about here, it's not always secret. It's normalized. It's making the victims out of to be political pawns, using lawsuits as proof of deep state attacks, saying 26 sexual assault allegations are fake news, getting evangelical leaders to say God can use a flawed man. Oh my God, when there was the assassination attempt, the evangelical church went on saying that he's the chosen one. Like, talk about going against the 10 Commandments. God, man. Beware of false prophets. That's what they said. As they wear the red hat and follow every word he says. Beware the mark of the beast. Because those are the signs of the end of times. And they believe it. And they... God. It's like Trump doesn't just have powerful friends. He has a cult of absolution built into the fucking GOP, built into white evangelicalism. And every time he escapes accountability, he proves to his followers that you can abuse power if you play the victim well enough. And that's what churches did. That's what Trump's doing now. And the Republican Party, they're just not tall. They're basing their whole platform on it. Like, you think it's coincidence that the loudest family values politicians are the same ones who defending Trump's abuse, blocking child sex abuse legislation, passing anti-LGBTQ plus laws while covering up real predator scandals? I mean, for the love of God, how many times have we seen GOP Congress people and state Congress, like any Republican Party affiliated, being caught about being for child pornography and all that? I mean, come on. It's like... It's a deliberate fusion of political ambition and religious science or silence. They created a wall where abuse hides behind freedom, where predators wrap themselves in flags and Bibles, and where anyone who dares challenge the system gets labeled a groomer, a radical, or a liar. But that wall isn't indestructible. It cracked when Spotlight published the report. It cracked when survivors stood up in court. And it can crack again if we name the system for what it is. And let's be honest, this isn't about drag queens. It's not about bathrooms. It's not about school books or rainbow flags. Again, it all comes back to control. And they want to control. They want to erase people who make them uncomfortable. About building a world where they don't have to face consequences. Ever. Talk about a dictatorship. And that's why this lie keeps coming back. But the truth, the real truth, it terrifies the church and the political party, and the Republican Party. It terrifies them that people are seeing through the facade. That we're asking hard questions. That we're naming names. From pulpits to Mar-a-Lago. So what do we do now? We need to fight the lie with truth. We fight the silence with testimony. We fight the institutions with exposure. We say the words they won't say. Trump is not a victim. He is an abuser. The Republican Party is not pro-life. It's a pro-power and pro-cover-up. Pro-rapist is what they are. Pro-death. Pro-child abuse. Pro-child death. Pro everything that is against what they say they claim to be. And then the church isn't holy just because it said so. Holiness comes from justice, not PR. We don't shut up. We don't back down. We don't stop telling the truth because the lie depends on our silence. Is what they want, our silence. So here's what I want you to think. Like, they built this whole machine on fear, but they forgot one thing. Survivors don't scare easy anymore. The church thought silence will protect them. Trump thought power will protect them. Sadly, it kind of is still, but we'll get to it. He will. I'm hoping. The GOP thinks laws will protect them. But the truth is louder than all of that. And truth doesn't need a pulpit or a flag or a billionaire. It just needs us, the people. It needs us saying the words. Us calling out the abuse. Us ending the lie once and for all. And I want you to think about that before I sign out. It's always the loudest ones that are the ones who are covering up something. It's projection, guys. And I want you to really think about that before you decide to tune me out or call me a liberal cuck or whatever you want to call me nowadays. But I'm not an idiot. I know what these people are capable of. And it's scary. Trump knew Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell very well. They were very good friends. And you tell me that he didn't know about their abuse? No, he is part of it. But he's still president. He has the backup of the evangelical church. Any church. And we've proven in this episode that the church is the home of predators. Sexual predators to children. And Trump loves the church now. Because they know how to protect predators. I know this is a hard claim to say, but it's true. It's not isolated. And if you don't believe me, go search how many Republican politicians and pastors and all that have been caught about sexual abuse. And I want you to see this statistic. It's sad, but we need to fight it. I love everyone. Everybody's welcome, no matter what. Sorry, I didn't mean that. Like, everybody's welcome. I respect your religion. I respect who you are. I respect you. You are human. We need to fight this together. Call you Congress people. Demand justice. I'll see you all later.